is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and joining me as always, the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He never actually got the mousetrap to go off in the game Mousetrap, Stu Horvath.
I hated that game.
It's a lot more difficult than you think. I mean, on the box, it looks so cool. I'm like, I'm going to set off this mousetrap, but in the end of the day, it's not really so fun because you work your way to the end.
Yeah.
And the one person gets to set off the mousetrap and it never actually works.
I also feel like it's a lot of setup and you kind of breathe on it funny. It falls over.
Oh, yeah. No, I've done it before where I had someone close the door to the room we were in hard and the whole thing just went off. Then you have to reset the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we're stoked to be back. And today is a very special episode because today is actually produced by one of our patrons. Coming in at the $25 level, you get to pick what we do on the show. So today we're doing Mouse Guard as requested by
Sarah Clemens.
And thank you so much, Sarah, for pledging to our patron. That's a lot of peas and popping. We really do appreciate it. And we were actually so stoked to finally crack open that Mouse Guard box that Stu's had sitting on the shelf for a little while. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what we're playing this week. And I'm really excited about this. It's a game called Heimlich & Co.
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of fun with this.
We had too much fun with this, albeit it is a terrible name for a game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who wants to be associated with, let's play like the Heimlich maneuver game. It's like, ugh.
I'm like, Heimlich & Co., what could this game possibly be about? Well, it's about spies.
And of all things.
Of all things. And
not
I'm gonna
choking on food.
Not
Spies.
choking on food, spies. And I'm going to tell you, one of the most fun games I've ever played.
Yeah.
It is shockingly fun. It is so easy and so fast-paced. It's a mystery game. You play as one of 7 different countries. And you get a card handed to you in the beginning of the game, and that's the country that you represent.
I'm really interested in hearing you explain it because I think it's going to sound a lot more complicated than it really is.
I've been working on this for days.
All right.
So you are a spy from a certain country, and the country can be one of any countries. I mean, it could be Germany, it could be Russia, it could be France, it could be Great Britain, it could be the United States, whatever.
Sure.
You know which country you're from. The rest of the people playing don't know which country you are playing from. You roll a dice to move around the game board, and the game board consists of different buildings in the town that you're in. And in one of those buildings, there is a vault with secrets. Now, whenever a spy gets to that vault, the round ends, you count up the points, and the points are done and based on whatever building that you're in. So they have buildings that range from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way down to 0 and -3 points.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, on your turn, when you roll the dice, you actually get to move any of the characters to try to throw off the people from just figuring out which country that you're in. So you are kind of trying to evade suspicion by constantly moving other chips around and sometimes not even moving yours around. There's a great strategy of the game in order to get from A to B. Sometimes you have to take some negative points or get a lesser point value than you might have wanted in order to not give away that you're the country that you're playing as.
Exactly. And usually, I mean, we've played with, I think, 5 players.
Right.
And it supports up to 7, but those other 2 cards, those 2 counters are still in the game.
Right.
So there's 2 things that, they don't have players. And if one of those actually hits the high point mark and ends the game, everybody loses.
And everyone loses. So it's completely possible for, I mean, we played twice. We played once with 5 people with 2 countries left over.
Yeah.
And then we played once with 6 people with 1 country left over. Now, the cool thing is, like, you don't know. And the whole time, you're trying to, because I know everyone at the table is doing this, you're trying to figure out a strategy, trying to watch the players, how many times they move which different little chits. Now, the pieces are flags for the country that you represent. And then they have these little chits with small flags on it that are very, very hard to read to represent the number of points you have in the round going around the board. So Stu actually did a pretty cool thing. He replaced them with meeples.
Yep.
Now, we are very pro meeple on the show. I do love little and cute things, as you know, and these meeples are really little and cute. And it was a much better experience and a faster experience when we replaced the chips with meeples, because then we were able to see things as we were playing a little better.
Yeah, because it was just colors as opposed to, oh, it's a flag. What flag is it? Is it Germany? Is it Italy?
Right.
And it was also hard to see. The coloring wasn't that awesome.
Yeah.
And so it all just became, you simplify it to just color. You can track it easier.
That said, you still can't track the other players. So everyone had strategies going. Everyone was trying to figure out who was who. I actually went an entire game convincing other players that I was the complete opposite country that I was, and I won. I was France. Vive la France, baby. I took it home that game, but everyone thought I was Germany.
I haven't won either time that we played or done particularly well, but I have done really good at making sure that nobody knows who I am while I'm playing.
Right. It's tricky. It is a very, very tricky game, and it is an older game.
Yeah, from the 80s, I think.
Yeah, there's been different versions of it in different countries throughout the years. This version that we're playing, I think, is the most current version.
Yeah.
And it's a blast. It's one of those games that I think has immediately graduated into steady and heavy rotation in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I think everybody, when we got it, there was and we almost everybody got it at the same time. So there was sort of like this, like a little bit of electricity that went around the table. We're like, oh, and then everybody got really excited and kind of wanted to play it again, but I think it was getting late.
It was getting late, and we had already played 3 other games that night.
Yeah.
And also, when you had the idea, like halfway through the game, I should get meeples for this, people were content to wait.
Yeah.
Because that extra like $3 that you spent on the meeples, the game went a lot faster. It becomes a lot more fast paced when you're not concerned with, oh, what flag is that? Is it Italy? I don't know. It was very hard to tell. So I highly, 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 highly recommend Heimlich & Co. Definitely go out there, check it out, get some meeples, replace the little chits with the meeples, and you're going to have an absolute blast playing with your friends.
Yeah, I think this is one is going to be in our heavy rotation for a while.
Fantastic, Stu. I look forward to game night anyway, but now this is actually right up there with Ghost Fight and Treasure Hunters. It's one of those games where we play it more often than not.
Yeah.
Heavy rotation in the clubhouse. So, Stu, why don't you chat me up a little bit about the $25 tier of our Patreon, which is what we're doing today.
Yeah.
We're doing a very specific episode for a very special patron.
So basically the idea is if you back us at $25, every 6 months, you get to pick what we talk about on the podcast. That's basically it.
Which is pretty cool. That's a hell of a sales pitch, Stu.
Hey, I'm not the salesman.
What's cool is that I look at it as a challenge because I feel like people who are going to come in at this level are going to put something out there that might not be something we would have gotten to right away. And Mouse Guard is definitely one of them. So Mouse Guard originally started out as a comic book. And it is a bi-monthly comic that's been coming out since about 2006. And it is created, written, and drawn by David Peterson.
David Peterson is a fantastic artist who like popped fully formed out of the box onto the comic book scene. Like he's just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Like just gorgeous work.
I guarantee that if you haven't read Mouse Guard, you've definitely seen his work somewhere.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, gorgeous work. Now, the Mouse Guard is set in a world of sentient mice that live in a medieval era. So it kind of parallels the same age in human history. Now, in their world, there's no humans, so the stories revolve around the brotherhood of mice known as the Mouse Guard. They've sworn an oath to serve their fellow civilian mice in times of need, including making safe passage for them through the wilderness and protecting them from predators.
Yeah. So a lot of the game is sort of focused on things that you wouldn't really normally associate with a role-playing game, like delivering the mail. Because, over a big wilderness for a bunch of mice, that's kind of hard.
And dangerous.
Yeah. And mice aren't built for fighting.
No, definitely not.
The way the characters are structured, like everything is about running away, and you have to kind of fight against that, which is kind of cool.
So why don't you talk to me a little bit about the gameplay of this system?
So the system is a stripped-down version of Burning Wheel, which is an old, an OSR, old school revival kind of game. So it's a really nitty-gritty, in-depth simulation kind of system, but they stripped it down to make this really open kind of semi-storytelling system. I think in the way that they've built it, it has a lot more in common with like Tales from the Loop than Burning Wheel or something like really heavy like White Box.
Which is pretty cool when you think that now in 2019, storytelling games are bigger than ever.
Right.
This game's been out for a while. This game has been out since 2008. It's one of those very early storytelling games on a much, much larger scale. They just released the second edition of it in 2015.
Yeah, which is what we played.
Awesome.
I feel like a lot of the fun of it in what we played was the creation of the characters. It's skill-based, so you're looking at a skill plus an attribute, and you roll some dice. 4, 5s, and 6s are successes. 1, 2, and 3 aren't. Easy, right? The more successes you get, the better you do. But the character creation was cool because it dealt a lot with who you were and what your background was. And I feel like you, Ed, and George kind of organically came together into a group of mice that I wanted to sort of explore and know more, And I thought that was really cool because like I feel like the stories will just come out of the interactions between your characters.
And I think that's a very important thing because as we were making the characters, I think that's to me differentiates this from a system like a Dungeons and Dragons or most other role playing game systems. In most cases, you're trying to build a death dealer.
Yeah.
You are trying to build a person who is twice tough and will not go down in a fight. Whereas you're dealing with mice, which is something you said before. Mice are fragile creatures. They're not very tough. They're not meant to be the tanks. However, we formed a fighting unit because they actually give you ranks, for the mouse guard, where a person could be like, well, I'm going to play the rookie recruit, which is what I did. I was like the little young mouse. My mouse's name was Oui Monsieur, and that's WEE as in little Monsieur. He was the new guy. He was the new kid. However, very complimentary to Ed's unit leader. George is like the old salty, grizzled veteran who's, he's a lifer in the mouse guard.
Yeah, he's a lifer, but he never got to be like commander.
Never wanted to either.
Whereas Ed's character is a young guy who hit command really early. So there's a little bit of a tension there.
And we got to play off that tension.
Yeah.
Which is great about the character creation. What I loved about it is besides the typical fighter stats, healer stats, there's hunter, instructor, pathfinder, survivalist, weather watcher, and then you could add other things on there as well, other forms of skills where you could be a haggler, you could be herb-wise out in the field. My guy was, his family, generationally, were armor makers.
That's right, yeah.
So my guy knew about making armor. Now, didn't get as far enough to make armor in the game. However, he had a good understanding of it, and it gives you a story. You also build into the story who's your mentor, who's your enemy. You're fleshing out an entire world before you even roll that first dice and get out into the field.
Yeah, and by enemy, what Hambone's saying is like those are actually like the seeds for NPCs that I will eventually use when we play an ongoing campaign,
right?
Which is awesome. Like to build that in the character creation.
It's collaborative storytelling at its finest.
Yeah.
Listen, I've been a dungeon master a long time. Stu's been a dungeon master twice as long. There is a lot to be said about creating a world yourself, or even going out of the world, say built from the Wilderness Survival Guide, or the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then having people exist in that world, and you're telling your story, and you are the narrator. Mouse Guard is fantastic because it gives you the opportunity to help the narrator tell the story. So it's a rich experience for both the player and the person running the game because, hey, let's face it, you want to know just as much as I want to tell you why my guy doesn't like Jeff.
Exactly. I think that's really the appeal. I've seen a lot of people playing this game online and talking about it on Twitter, and I thought that's kind of interesting. So the obvious sell, I think, coming to role-playing games and not being sort of inducted to it through Dungeons & Dragons, I think the obvious sell is the mice. It's cute.
I like cute.
The woodland thing, it kind of taps into the sort of the Wind in the Willows or the Redwall books. And I think that you get a different kind of player or a person who's playing and is interested in different things. And what's really great about the system is that it scales. You could jump into it and use the basic rules that they present at the front of the book, and it'll be a fun game that you can play with your friends and make up a story together. But then you can get in those other rules like the wises and stuff, and you could there is a lot of crunch to the rules if you want, but you don't need them. If you don't want to add them in, if you want to keep it light, you could choose to keep it pretty simple. And I think that's great.
I think it's great too because unlike most RPGs, there's no way to munchkin a mouse guard character.
No.
There's absolutely no way to munchkin a mouse guard character. Because listen, truth be told, I sat there for a second. I'm like, okay, how can I make my guy the most effective fighter? Because it's ingrained in my soul.
Yeah.
Because when I've played role-playing games, it's what are you going to do to not die today?
Yeah.
And in Mouse Guard, you don't have that luxury. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that because it gives me as a player a lot more freedom to automatically, my go-to now is thinking outside the box. My go-to is trying to get the fullest amount out of this experience and also still not die. But now I have to try a little harder.
Well, I think one of the things that we had the most difficulty with, and this is just because of our backgrounds, not necessarily something key to the design of the game, but most of the challenges in the game are a single die roll. So like you're tracking, you roll the die, you either succeed or you fail. And I think that's super easy because then you just get to talk about the stuff, what you're doing, and I get to tell you what the result is, and then we move on. But the climactic battle, the confrontation, you guys wound up fighting a snake.
You certainly did.
And I think that there's an abstraction to combat in Mouse Guard that, because we're used to, assimilating every single sword stroke because of D&D,
Right.
that we kind of didn't quite grok how Mouse Guard treats combat. There's a card mechanic. You each have a goal. The snake's goal was to defend the nest, but your goal was to kill the snake. That's what you're fighting for.
Right. So let's talk about that card dynamic a little bit more, because it was very important to combat, and I actually loved it. Because you're a fighting unit. You are a Mouse Guard.
Yeah.
So now you're faced with, it's not like, roll for initiative in D&D, where it's like I roll for initiative and you already have 6 moves ahead in your brain of how you're going to destroy this creature. In Mouse Guard, what's great about it is the unit leader gets to pick the first move and gets to pick the order in which the moves unfold.
Yeah.
Where you have feint, you have attack, you have
Defend and maneuver.
So
it becomes a little bit of like a rock, paper, scissors thing.
right. And what's cool about that is it causes you to really fight as a team and not as an individual player trying to get their shit in.
Yeah.
Which, look, nothing wrong with that.
No.
That's how it happens, though, in D&D. That's how it happens in most RPGs. Mouse Guard, you actually make a plan with your unit and kind of look to the items that you have. Now, you do get items in this as well. What I do love about the Mouse Guard game is that you also, besides getting those cards to dictate how the battle is going to go, you get great dice.
Oh, the custom dice are great.
The custom dice are magnificent.
Axes, swords, and snakes.
And snakes, they're perfect. You also get cards for your weapons and your armor, which lets you know what kind of boosts that you have. It lets you know what kind of bonuses you have to roll. And it's great to have access to those so you can just kind of lay them out in front of you. Granted, look, you still have the character sheet. However, in combat, you're looking at these cards and you're thinking ahead, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be most effective for my team?
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
And it's a storytelling thing too, right? You're not worried about your hit points.
Right.
Because you're not ever taking direct damage. It's just like you might take a status, which is like hurt or angry, which would affect your die rolls if you fail something in the middle of combat. But you're not dealing with results. You're worried about, telling the story that mirrors the result of the card versus the card. And I think that as a group, we struggled with a little bit because we wanted to just, fight.
Because that's what we're used to.
Yeah.
This is much cooler, I think, in some ways, because the fighting actually felt a little more organic. I actually looked at it and I thought about it for a while. I think back to very, very old D&D where sword speed counted, which on paper, I imagine I would have gone crazy thinking about how this actually works and trying to figure out, well, whose sword would have hit first? And this is such a streamlined version of that where even the opponent gets kind of shuffled into the mix of that. So it becomes cinematic. And it does it in a way where you are on your toes because you need to pay attention so you can be a part of the story.
Exactly.
Essentially, it's not, the next action. You're almost producing the next scene.
Yeah, so I feel like people can dial out of D&D combat and just, hit the thing with the sword when it's their turn. This, you kind of have to be paying attention to what just happened because you have to justify the results and kind of weave it into a smooth story. And the best part about it is we played it where it was a fight, but those rules apply to any kind of group conflict. It could be an argument and the same thing works. And you can kind of see how, there's feints and there's dodging in arguments too.
Right.
You just have to apply it differently. I think that's really great.
Yeah, it's a great system. And I think it lends itself to any kind of storytelling game because you can use it for multiple different things.
I think that it's so important to have. I'm so tired of D&D. I love D&D.
Right.
I really do. But there's so many different things that you could play. And
Yeah.
this is one of them. And I'm just excited that people have found this game and seem to play a lot of it. Because it's not about combat. I feel like D&D is so combat oriented. It's refreshing to play games that aren't.
I do agree with you to a point. I'm still super, super in love with D&D. And sometimes I just want to go and kill a bunch of stuff. That said, I think what's great about Mouse Guard is that it does give you that kind of balance because there is a lot more that you have to do to role play and story tell in Dungeons and Dragons. Because, and to a degree, I think a lot of people experience that anxiety that comes from do I actually want to play my character? Do I want to be my character? Can I just roll these dice and just kind of be quiet and just kind of go through the actions?
Yeah.
When it comes to puzzle solving, like people are tapping their feet, like looking around the room, they're checking their phones. Something like Mouse Guard is great because it takes all of the weight and all the anxiety out of how am I going to role play my character. It's just like, hey, I've crafted this backstory. I can just think and act like my character because I've laid it all out. And my story ties directly into your stories, which ties directly into her story, which ties directly into the narrator's story.
You have cues, right? All of that stuff that we worked through in the character generation is support, ideas, like guidance for how you should roleplay. Not like in a teacherly way, but just sort of a supportive, like, hey, remember this thing that you just came up with that you wanted to explore? You can explore that.
I think it's cool too because it gives everyone the opportunity to have their hero moment in each session.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, is kind of hard to do when you're playing with 4, 6, 7 players to make sure that everyone gets what they want to get in over.
Yeah.
And to be able to walk away and be like, man, I did that. Because there's a lot of bleed when it comes to other RPGs where characters, I'm a barbarian, but I also kind of like cast spells a little bit. Or like I'm a cleric, but I have these thieves tools. Like this is very, you have a job, you're going to do your job. And because you're doing your job, you're going to get your moment.
Yeah.
And I love that.
At the start of every session, you set your own goal.
Right.
Like, what does your character want to accomplish this game? And if you succeed, you get experience and you get to adjust some of your stats. It's simple.
For my character specifically, because I was the new kid on the block, new recruits don't get cloaks. Like all the mice have cloaks. So new recruits don't get cloaks. So I wanted a purple cloak, but I couldn't have a purple cloak because I'm the new guy. So my goal, my whole ambition for the game was to do something awesome to impress my higher ranking officers so I could earn my cloak in the game.
Yep.
And it was great because in combat, we all had a role to play. I got to have this great hero moment where I tried to like sacrifice myself to save my buddy George, who had lost in combat and in distraction, all his weapons.
Yeah.
And I got bit by the snake. But you guys still didn't give me my friggin' purple cloak.
You guys lost. You didn't succeed.
But I was a hero.
But that's not how it works.
I know.
But that's kind of cool too, because like that says a lot about your character. He's trying to do this thing and he failed, but maybe he was trying to do it in the wrrong way. Like there's all sorts of stuff that just kind of comes out of that.
I don't think there's a right way to get bit by a snake, Stu. I'm just going to put that on the table.
No, I mean earning your cloak. Maybe
yeah.
you should have tried to sacrifice yourself to save your friend. It just shifts things around.
All right. Well, do you have any other thoughts on Mouse Guard?
No, other than the fact that for the money, you're getting a box that's full of awesome stuff that is beautiful to look at. So at the very least, that is a great reason to buy it. But I think that it's a fantastic game for anybody looking to try role-playing games that isn't interested or attracted to what they think D&D is about. And I think that the more games like that are out there like Mouse Guard, the better we are off as a hobby.
Right on, Stu. So definitely check out our Patreon, patreon.com/vintagerpg, because we do have a ton of great stuff on there, including monthly essays, unboxing videos, and you get the episodes of the Vintage RPG podcast early.
You do.
Well, enough shilling for our Patreon.
I just want to say that the highest compliment I think that you can receive for this particular thing where you basically pay us to do something, I think that Mouse Guard is actually going to be in our rotation for a little while. I think that we're going to continue playing at least a couple more sessions to kind of figure out what these characters are all about.
Definitely.
I think that's testament to the game.
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah, for turning us on to our new favorite game. We really do appreciate it. So we're going to talk about the Roll20 app, which is something that up until recently, Stu was yet to try. We did talk about in our previous episode getting the Unwinnable gang together to play a game called Blades in the Dark, which Stu wanted to run on Roll20 because people are scattered across the country right now. So Stu, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with the Roll20 app?
So actually, I didn't have anything to do with this. One of my players suggested it. And I was just like, yeah, whatever, man. Whatever's the easiest way to, set up the video streaming. He sends us this stuff. And Roll20 has, and I don't know if this is true for other games. I'm assuming it's true for Dungeons and Dragons, but Blades of the Dark has a lot of integration in it. So we've not played yet, but we made characters. It was 2 hours and it was a fantastic experience. Character sheets are there. You write in everything. You click little buttons. It has like a very video game inventory character generation management feel to it that was really satisfying. It really walked us through it the entire way. We felt very supported by the app, and it was just a fantastic little experience. I always just thought that, remote role-playing was going to be such a pain in the neck, and this thing makes it so simple. I just don't believe it, Hambone. It's like magic.
It is like magic. I will tell you, I have played D&D over Skype, and this is years ago. And you were really at the whimsy of the internet that you're playing over.
Yeah.
And also, do I have my character sheet? Do I have my dice? Do I have everything I need? I would do it in hotel rooms when I was on the road for work.
Right on.
And it was great. It was great to just be able to play and not lose a step and hang out with my friends. That said, I took a look at the sheets that you were sending me and the setup that you had for the Roll20, seeing everything so perfectly integrated into the screen that you're using is amazing.
Can't understate how awesome that is. It's just so nice. It was the starting thing. So you create your characters, but you also create your crew. And creating your crew, you kind of start designing your lair and, who you like, who you don't like. It's a semi-storytelling game. But all of those things are laid out on the crew sheet. And I wanted to, make a much higher level crew so I could fiddle with all that stuff and see how it works. And I think everybody else did. I think it's another kind of hook to make you want to play because you want to check the boxes off,
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, we are people who love organization. We're people who love checking off boxes, and we love playing games. So this is the best of all three worlds for us.
Yeah. And it saves everything. It keeps everything nice and neat. You don't have to worry about pencil marks or erasing or like writing the whole thing out all over again. It was great. It's sorcery. It's black magic. I don't believe that this exists. I think it must be a delusion that I was overtired or something, and I'm making all of this up. That's how weirded out I am that I had such a pleasant experience.
Yeah, you're a hard sell. Generally, with any kind of new technology, you are a hard sell. So this is high marks. Look, our time's precious, and investing in something, you want to make sure you're investing in the right thing. So I've had heard nothing but amazing things about Roll20 leading up to it. I got on it, and I was floored with how easy it was, how intuitive it was, how good it looked.
Mostly free too. Like
Mostly
none of us
free.
are paying for it.
Yeah.
It all works so good.
And whatever you do pay for is definitely worth paying for. The juice is definitely worth the squeeze on Roll20.
High marks, man. You're gonna have to work really hard to make me more impressed than I am with Roll20.
I know it's like really cold outside, but did hell actually freeze over, Stu, before you came over today? Because I don't know you right now.
Dude, it's so cold out.
It is so cold out.
I might be dead. This might all be a hallucination. Like I said, I'm really surprised at how into this I am.
Well, fever dream or not, definitely check out Roll20. So that's it for this episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. It was an absolute pleasure talking about Mouse Guard today. Stu, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at vintagerpg.com, and you can find me on Unwinnable every day, writing stories and editing stories. That's unwinnable.com.
So you can find me on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire, where I'm constantly putting up pictures of the podcasts I produce and of the adventures that I have. You can also check out my other podcast, My Tai Happy Hour, at mytaitv.com, or where podcasts are found. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.